Amara, this place is practically a palace, Blaine exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with ambition as we stepped through the grand entrance of my childhood home. I bristled at his tone, feeling a surge of protectiveness wash over me. It was my father's dream, Blaine, not a playground for your schemes, I retorted, my voice sharper than intended. Blaine's smile faltered for a moment before he recovered, wrapping an arm around my waist. Come on, darling. I'm just saying we could do so much with this place. Think of the possibilities. I shrugged off his touch, moving deeper into the foyer. The familiar scent of polished wood and old books enveloped me, stirring memories of quieter times. My father's presence seemed to linger in every corner, a silent guardian of the legacy he'd left behind. My name is Amara, and I've just inherited a house that's threatening to tear my marriage apart. We're not doing anything with it, I said firmly, turning to face Blaine. This house stays exactly as it is. Blaine's charming facade slipped, revealing a flash of frustration. Don't be ridiculous, Amara. A property like this needs to be utilized. We could host events, rent out rooms. No, I cut him off. This isn't a business opportunity. It's my family home. Our family home, Blaine corrected, his tone growing insistent. We're married, remember? What's yours is mine. The words sent a chill down my spine. I'd never heard him speak like this before, so nakedly greedy. That's not how this works, Blaine. My father left the house to me, not us. Blaine's eyes narrowed. You can't be serious. You're going to let all this potential go to waste because of some misplaced sentimentality. Before I could respond, the front door swung open. My mother, Edith, stepped inside, her arms laden with groceries. I thought I heard voices, she said, her smile faltering as she sensed the tension in the room. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Mom, I said quickly, moving to help her with the bags. Blaine and I were just discussing the house. Edith's gaze flicked between us, her expression knowing. I see. Well, why don't we talk about it over lunch? I've brought enough for everyone. As we made our way to the kitchen, I caught Blaine eyeing the antique vases and paintings that lined the hallway. The hunger in his gaze made my stomach churn. This place must be worth a fortune, he muttered, more to himself than to us. My mother's hand found mine, squeezing gently. When I met her eyes, I saw my own concerns reflected there. She knew, as I did, that Blaine's interest in the house went far beyond mere appreciation. As we settled around the kitchen table, the weight of my inheritance pressed down on me. I'd always known the house would be mine someday, but I'd never anticipated the complications it would bring. My father's dream had become my burden, and I wasn't sure how to shoulder it. Blaine launched into an enthusiastic monologue about his plans for the estate, each suggestion more grandiose than the last. I half listened, my mind racing. How had I never noticed this side of him before? Or had it always been there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right opportunity? As Blaine's voice droned on, I caught my mother's eye. The silent understanding that passed between us was clear. We had a fight on our hands, and it was only just beginning. The doorbell chimed, its melodic tone echoing through the cavernous halls of my childhood home. I tensed, knowing who awaited on the other side. I'll get it, Blaine called, his eagerness palpable. Before I could protest, he swung the door open, revealing his sister Lila's perfectly coiffed silhouette. Darling, Lila trilled, air-kissing Blaine's cheeks before turning her calculating gaze on me. Amara, how lovely to see you. And in such grand surroundings. I forced a smile, my father's words echoing in my mind. Kill them with kindness, sweetheart. It's the surest way to disarm those who mean you harm. Lila, welcome, I said, gesturing her inside. Can I offer you something to drink? As we settled in the living room, I couldn't help but notice Lila's eyes darting around, appraising every antique and artwork. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her glass, a predatory rhythm that set my nerves on edge. So, Amara, Lila began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, Blaine tells me you've inherited quite the estate. It must be overwhelming, managing such a property all on your own. I caught the underlying implication and bristled. It's a lot of responsibility, certainly, but it's one I'm honored to take on. My father trusted me with his legacy. Blaine chimed in, his tone overly casual. Of course, darling. But Lila's right, it's a big job for just one person. We were thinking. We. I interrupted, arching an eyebrow. Lila leaned forward, her smile sharpening. Well, family helps family, doesn't it? I have some experience in property management. I'd be more than happy to lend a hand. The air in the room grew thick with tension. I could feel Blaine and Lila's eyes on me, waiting for my response. My mind raced back to countless dinners with my father, his gentle voice imparting wisdom. Trust your instincts, Amara. They'll never lead you astray. That's very kind of you, Lila, I said carefully, but I think I can manage. This house has been in my family for generations. We know its quirks better than anyone. Lila's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered. Of course, of course. I just hate to see such potential go to waste. A house like this, it's practically begging to be shared with the world. It's not going to waste, I countered, my patience wearing thin. It's being preserved, just as my father intended. Blaine cleared his throat, clearly sensing the rising tension. Maybe we could compromise? Host a few events. Open up some of the rooms for. No, I said firmly, surprising even myself with the steel in my voice. This isn't a hotel or an event space. It's my home. Lila's mask of politeness slipped, revealing a flash of frustration. Don't be selfish, Amara. A place like this, wasted on just one person? It's practically criminal. The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a threat. I stood, my hands shaking slightly. I think it's time for you to leave, Lila. As I showed her out, Lila's parting words sent a chill down my spine. Think about it, Amara. Families should stick together, shouldn't we? The door closed with a final click, and I leaned against it, exhaling slowly. When I turned, Blaine was watching me, his expression unreadable. You didn't have to be so harsh, he said, a note of accusation in his voice. I stared at him, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. And you didn't have to invite her here without telling me. This is my house, Blaine. My inheritance. Not a playground for your family's ambitions. As I walked away, leaving Blaine sputtering in the foyer, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination settling in my chest. The seeds of discord had been sown, and I knew with certainty that this was only the beginning of a long and bitter harvest. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as I sat with my mother, Edith, nursing a cup of coffee. The events of the past few days weighed heavily on my mind. I'm worried about Blaine, Edith said, breaking the comfortable silence. He seems different since you inherited the house. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. You've noticed too, huh? Edith reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Sweetheart, I've seen the way he looks at this place. It's not with love or respect. It's with hunger. Before I could respond, Blaine burst into the kitchen, his face alight with excitement. Amara, darling, I've had the most brilliant idea. I exchanged a wary glance with my mother. What is it, Blaine? A party, he exclaimed, spreading his arms wide. A grand soiree to celebrate our new home. We'll invite all the right people, show off the estate. It'll be magnificent. My stomach churned. Blaine, we've talked about this. This isn't our home in that sense. It's my family's legacy. His smile faltered for a moment before returning, now tinged with condescension. Don't be silly, Amara. We're married. What's yours is mine, remember? Besides, think of the connections we could make. The opportunities. I stood, my patience wearing thin. No, Blaine. There will be no party. This isn't a showcase or a networking opportunity. It's my home. Blaine's charming facade cracked, revealing a flash of anger. You're being ridiculous. You can't keep this place all to yourself. It's selfish. Selfish. I repeated, incredulous. Wanting to honor my father's memory is selfish? Edith stood, placing herself between us. That's enough, both of you. Blaine, I think you need to take a walk and cool down. For a moment, I thought Blaine might argue. But then he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the front door behind him. Edith turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. Amara, honey, I think it's time we had a serious talk about your marriage. Hours later, I found myself in my father's study, surrounded by his books and mementos. The room still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco, a comforting scent that brought tears to my eyes. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. "Come in," I called, hastily wiping my eyes. Edith entered, carrying a tray with tea and sandwiches. "I thought you might need this," she said, setting it down on the desk. I managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Mom." She settled into the chair across from me, her gaze steady and comforting. "Your father and I always worried about Blaine, you know. He never quite fit with our family's values." I nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. "I think I always knew deep down. I just didn't want to see it." "It's not your fault, sweetheart," Edith said gently. "Love can blind us to people's true nature. But now you have a choice to make." Before I could respond, the sound of music and laughter drifted up from downstairs. My blood ran cold. He didn't. We rushed downstairs to find the foyer filled with people in cocktail attire. Blaine stood in the center, holding court like a king in his castle. There you are," he called, spotting us. "Amara, darling, come meet everyone. They're all dying to see the rest of the house." I stood frozen, rage and disbelief warring within me. Blaine had gone behind my back, completely disregarding my wishes and my father's legacy. As the partygoers turned to look at me, their expectant faces blurring together, I felt something inside me snap. This was the last straw. "Everyone out," I said, my voice low but carrying across the suddenly silent room.
"Now."
Blaine's face contorted with anger. "Amara, don't be ridiculous. You're embarrassing us." I met his gaze, steel in my voice.
"No, Blan."
"You've embarrassed yourself. This party is over, and so is our marriage." As the guests began to file out, murmuring in confusion, I turned to my mother. Her eyes shone with pride and understanding. "It's time to take back control," I said, my resolve strengthening with each word. "This house and my life are mine. And I know exactly what I'm going to do with both." The morning after the disastrous party, I woke to an empty bed and muffled voices drifting from downstairs. Blaine hadn't returned to our room last night, and a part of me was relieved. I crept down the stairs, my heart pounding as I recognized the voices. Blaine and Lila. "She's being completely unreasonable," Blaine hissed. "This house could set us up for life, and she wants to keep it as some sort of shrine to her father." Lila's voice dripped with false sympathy. "Poor thing. She's clearly not thinking straight. Grief does funny things to people." I froze, my blood running cold. They were talking about me, about my inheritance, as if it were theirs to claim. "We need to act fast," Blaine continued. "I've been looking into ways to contest the will. If we can prove she's not fit to manage the estate." "You'd better not finish that sentence," I said, stepping into view. The look of shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation weren't so dire. Blaine recovered first, his charm sliding back into place like a mask. "Amara, darling, we were just plotting to steal my inheritance." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "I heard everything, Blaine. How long have you been planning this?" Lila stood, smoothing her designer skirt. "Now, Amara, let's not be hasty. We're only thinking of what's best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean best for yourselves. Get out, Lila. This is between me and my husband." As Lila scurried away, Blaine's facade crumbled. "You're making a mistake, Amara. This house, this fortune, it's wasted on you. You don't have the vision to see its potential." "Potential?" I spat. This was my father's home, his legacy. It's not some asset to be liquidated for your get-rich-quick schemes. Blaine's eyes narrowed. "Your father is dead, Amara. It's time to move on, to think about our future." The callousness of his words struck me like a physical blow. "Our future? There is no our anymore, Blaine. I want you out of this house by sundown." his face contorted with rage. You can't do this to me. I'm your husband, a husband who's been plotting behind my back, I retorted, who sees me as nothing more than an obstacle to his greed. It's over, Blaine. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You'll regret this, Samara. I'll make sure of it. Before I could react, a firm hand gripped Blaine's shoulder. Take your hands off my daughter. Edith's voice rang out, steel beneath her calm tone. Blaine released me, stepping back. This isn't over, he snarled, storming out of the room. As the front door slammed, I collapsed into a chair, trembling. Edith wrapped her arms around me, her presence a comforting anchor. I'm so sorry, Mom, I whispered. I should have listened to you about him years ago. Edith stroked my hair. You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. But now we need to protect you and your father's legacy. I nodded, wiping away tears. You're right. Blaine won't give up easily. He'll try to contest the will, maybe even claim I'm unstable. Then we'll fight him, Edith said firmly. Your father left everything ironclad. Blaine won't find any loopholes. As we sat there, planning our next moves, a weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time since inheriting the estate, I felt truly in control. I know what Dad would want me to do with this place, I said, an idea forming. Something that would drive Blaine crazy, but would honor everything Dad stood for. Edith smiled, understanding dawning in her eyes. I think I know where you're going with this. Your father would be so proud. As we began to sketch out plans, a sense of purpose filled me. Blaine had shown his true colors, and in doing so, he'd inadvertently set me free. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to fight for my father's legacy, and for myself. The morning sun streamed through the study windows as I sat across from my mother, Edith, surrounded by stacks of papers and old photo albums. The weight of recent events hung heavy in the air, but a spark of determination had ignited within me. Amara, Edith began, her voice gentle but firm, I think it's time we talked about what you want to do with this place. Your father always hoped it would serve a greater purpose. I nodded, running my fingers over a faded photograph of my father standing proudly in front of the estate. I've been thinking about that a lot, Mom. Blaine's greed. It's made me realize how far we've strayed from Dad's values. Edith leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. What do you have in mind? A community center, I said, the words tumbling out as the idea took shape. We could use the estate to help people, just like Dad always wanted. Education programs, support services, a place for people to come together. A slow smile spread across Edith's face. Your father would be so proud, Amara. It's perfect. As we began to sketch out plans, a knock at the door interrupted us. My cousin Cyrus poked his head in, his expression sheepish. Hey, Amara. Got a minute? He asked, stepping into the room. I tensed, remembering how Cyrus's careless remarks about the inheritance had fueled Blaine's greed. What is it, Cyrus? He shifted uncomfortably. I heard about what happened with Blaine. I feel partly responsible. The things I said about the estate's value. You didn't force Blaine to act the way he did. I cut him off, my tone softer than I'd intended. He made his own choices. Cyrus nodded, relief evident in his posture. Still, I want to make it right. I've got some connections in local government. If you're serious about this community center idea, I could help with the permits and zoning. I exchanged a glance with Edith, seeing my own surprise mirrored in her eyes. That would be incredible, Cyrus. Thank you. As Cyrus left, promising to make some calls, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe something good could come from all this pain after all. Our planning session was interrupted again, this time by the shrill ring of the doorbell. Edith and I made our way to the foyer, only to find Blaine standing on the doorstep, his lawyer in tow. Amara, Blaine said, his voice dripping with false concern, I've come to talk sense into you. This little tantrum of yours has gone on long enough. I stood my ground, feeling Edith's supportive presence behind me. There's nothing to discuss, Blaine. I've made my decision. Blaine's lawyer stepped forward, a predatory gleam in his eye. Mrs. Harrington, My client is willing to be generous in the divorce settlement, provided you reconsider your hasty actions regarding the estate. Hasty, I repeated, incredulous. I'm honoring my father's legacy. Something you wouldn't understand, Blaine. Blaine's charm evaporated, replaced by naked anger. You ungrateful, he lunged forward, but Edith was quicker, stepping between us. That's enough, she said, her voice like steel. You've shown your true colors, Blaine. Now leave, before we call the police. As Blaine and his lawyer retreated, hurling empty threats, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I turned to Edith, tears pricking at my eyes. Thank you, Mom, for everything. Edith pulled me into a fierce hug. You're stronger than you know, Amara. Your father saw it, and now the whole world will see it too. As we walked back to the study, our steps were lighter, our resolve stronger. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The estate would become a beacon of hope, a testament to my father's values and my own resilience. Blaine had tried to break me, but instead, he'd set me free. And I was ready to build something beautiful from the ashes of his betrayal. The grand ballroom of the estate buzzed with excitement as family members and old friends gathered for the annual Harrington reunion. I stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The weight of recent events pressed down on me, but I was determined to make this day a success. Edith appeared at my side, squeezing my hand reassuringly. You're doing great, sweetheart. Your father would be so proud. I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. As I scanned the room, my gaze landed on Blaine, who stood in a corner, nursing a drink and glaring in my direction. Despite my explicit request that he not attend, he'd shown up anyway, clearly spoiling for a fight. Cyrus approached, his expression apologetic.
I'm sorry, Amara.
I tried to keep him out, but he threatened to make a scene. It's okay, I sighed. Let's just try to keep things civil. As the evening progressed, I made my way through the crowd, discussing plans for the community center. The enthusiasm from my family and old friends was overwhelming, their support a balm to my wounded spirit. A community center? Lila's voice cut through the chatter, dripping with disdain.
How quaint.
Though I suppose it's better than letting all this go to waste. I turned to face her, steeling myself. It's what my father would have wanted, Lila. A way to give back to the community that supported him. Lila's eyes narrowed. And I'm sure it has nothing to do with spiting my brother. Before I could respond, Blaine appeared at Lila's side, his charm cranked up to full force. Ladies, why so serious? This is a party, after all. The tension in the air thickened as conversations around us died down. I could feel all eyes on us, waiting to see how this confrontation would play out. Blaine, I said, keeping my voice level, I think it's time for you to leave. His facade cracked, revealing the anger simmering beneath. Leave? This is as much my home as it is yours, Amara. You can't just erase me from this family. You did that yourself, I retorted, my patience wearing thin. When you decided that your greed was more important than our marriage, than my father's legacy. Blaine's face contorted with rage. Legacy? Your father was a fool who didn't know how to leverage what he had. And you're following right in his footsteps. A collective gasp rippled through the room. I felt as if I'd been slapped, but I stood my ground, my voice steady. My father was a great man who understood the value of giving back. Something you'll never comprehend. You ungrateful bitch, Blaine snarled, lunging forward. Several people moved to intervene, but Edith was faster, stepping between us. That's quite enough, she said, her voice like steel. Blaine, you're no longer welcome here. Leave now, or I'll have security escort you out. For a moment, I thought Blaine might actually strike my mother. But then, as if realizing the depth of his mistake, he deflated. This isn't over, he muttered, storming towards the exit. As the door slammed behind him, a stunned silence fell over the room. Then, slowly, applause began to build. I looked around in surprise to see my family and friends rallying around me, their faces filled with support and admiration. Cyrus stepped forward, raising his glass. To Amara, he called out, for standing up for what's right and honoring Uncle Harlan's memory. The room echoed with cheers and the clinking of glasses. As I stood there, surrounded by love and support, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Blaine had shown his true colors to everyone, and in doing so, he'd lost any power he might have held over me or my family. Edith wrapped an arm around me, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, sweetheart. You stood your ground." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "This is just the beginning, Mom. We've got a community center to build." As the party resumed around us, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I was excited about the future. Blaine's revelation had freed me, and I was ready to embrace the legacy my father had left me, not just the estate, but the values and strength he'd instilled in me all along. The grand opening of the Harrington Community Center was a spectacle of joy and celebration. Crowds gathered on the expansive lawn of what was once my family's private estate, now transformed into a beacon of hope for the entire town. As I cut the ribbon, cheers erupted, and I felt a surge of pride and vindication. Edith stood beside me, beaming with pride. "Your father would be over the moon, Amara," she whispered, squeezing my hand. As we toured the facilities, classrooms for adult education, a daycare center, art studios, and a state-of-the-art library, I caught glimpses of familiar faces. Cyrus was showing a group of local officials around, his enthusiasm infectious. Even some of Blaine's former friends were in attendance, their expressions a mix of admiration and sheepish apology. But it was the absence of two particular faces that struck me most. Blaine and Lila were nowhere to be seen. As if reading my thoughts, Edith leaned in. I heard through the grapevine that Lila's distanced herself from Blaine. Apparently, his behavior at the family gathering was the last straw. I nodded, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me. "And Blaine?" Edith's expression hardened. "Still licking his wounds, I imagine. But he's made his bed, Amara. You've risen above it all." As the day progressed, I found myself in conversation with countless community members, each expressing gratitude and excitement for the center. It was during one such conversation that I spotted a familiar figure lurking at the edge of the property. Excusing myself, I made my way over, my heart pounding. "Lila," I said, my voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lila looked different, subdued, almost contrite. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome," she admitted. "But I had to see it for myself." "See what?" She gestured to the bustling center.
This.
"What you've created. It's incredible, Amara. I was wrong about you, about all of this." I studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you, Lila. That means a lot." Lila's eyes welled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Amara. For everything. I got caught up in Blaine's schemes, in the allure of wealth. But seeing the impact you're making, it's opened my eyes." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught our attention. To my horror, I saw Blaine stumbling onto the property, clearly intoxicated and belligerent. "You think you've won?" he shouted, his words slurred. "This is all a sham. She's just doing this to spite me." Security moved to intercept him, but I held up a hand, stepping forward. "Blaine, stop. You're embarrassing yourself." He laughed bitterly. "Embarrassing myself? You've turned my life into a joke, Amara. Everything I worked for, gone because of your bleeding heart." The crowd had gone silent, all eyes on us. I felt a surge of pity for the man I once loved, now reduced to this pitiful spectacle.
No, Blan.
You did this to yourself. Your greed, your manipulation, that's what cost you everything. Blaine lunged forward, but Cyrus and another guest quickly restrained him. "You'll regret this, Samara," he spat. "You can't just erase me." As security led him away, I turned to address the stunned onlookers. "I'm sorry you all had to witness that," I said, my voice carrying across the lawn. "But if anything, it only reinforces why this center is so important. It's about community, about lifting each other up instead of tearing others down. A round of applause broke out, growing in intensity. As I looked out at the sea of supportive faces, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Blaine's outburst, far from undermining the day, had only served to highlight the contrast between his selfish ambitions and the positive impact of the community center. Lila approached, her expression a mix of shame and resolve. "I want to help," she said quietly. "If you'll let me. I have a lot to make up for." I nodded, a small smile playing at my lips. "We all do, Lila. That's what this place is about, second chances and new beginnings." As the celebration resumed around us, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been painful, but it had led me here, to a place of purpose, forgiveness, and hope. In honoring my father's legacy, I had found my own path forward, one that would ripple out and touch countless lives for years to come. 1 year after the community center's grand opening, I stood in my father's old study, now transformed into my office. The walls, once adorned with hunting trophies and old paintings, now showcased photographs of smiling faces, children learning to read, adults acquiring new skills, families finding support and connection. A gentle knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. "Come in," I called. Edith entered, her eyes twinkling with pride. "The board meeting is about to start, sweetheart. Are you ready?" I nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." As we walked through the bustling corridors of the Harrington Community Center, I marveled at how much had changed in just a year. The once imposing mansion now hummed with life and purpose. Every room, every hallway told a story of transformation and hope. We entered the boardroom, where familiar faces greeted us with warm smiles. Cyrus, now the center's program director, sat next to Lila, who had proven herself an invaluable volunteer coordinator. Even some of Blaine's former associates were present, having seen the light and joined our cause. As the meeting progressed, each report filled me with a sense of accomplishment and gratitude. Literacy rates in the community had improved. Job placements were up. Families were finding the support they needed to thrive. "And now," Cyrus announced, "I have a special surprise. Amara, if you could come with me?" Curious, I followed him out to the main hall, where a crowd had gathered. At the center stood a veiled object, clearly waiting to be revealed. "On behalf of the entire community," Cyrus began, his voice ringing out, "we want to honor the woman who made all of this possible. Amara, your vision, your strength, and your unwavering commitment to your father's values have changed countless lives." With a flourish, he pulled away the veil, revealing a beautiful bronze plaque. Inscribed upon it were the words, "The Harlan Harrington Memorial Wing, dedicated to Amara Harrington, who turned adversity into opportunity and showed us the true meaning of legacy." Tears welled in my eyes as applause erupted around me. Edith squeezed my hand, her own eyes glistening. As the crowd dispersed, I noticed a solitary figure lingering at the back of the hall. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized Blaine. He approached slowly, his once confident stride now hesitant. "Amara," he said softly. I don't know what to say." I studied his face, noting the lines of regret etched deeply. "You don't have to say anything, Blaine." He shook his head, his voice thick with emotion.
No, Ido.
"I was wrong. About everything. What you've done here, it's incredible. I was so blinded by greed that I couldn't see the true value of your father's legacy, of your vision." For a moment, I was transported back to the beginning of our story, the hope, the love we once shared. But as I looked around at the thriving community center, at the lives being changed, I realized that every step of the journey had led me exactly where I needed to be. "Thank you, Blaine," I said, my voice steady. "I hope you find peace." As he nodded and turned to leave, I felt the last vestiges of bitterness and anger melt away. In their place stood a profound sense of gratitude for the challenges that had shaped me, for the strength I'd found within myself, and for the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. Later that evening, as Edith and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the grounds now filled with playgrounds and community gardens. I felt a sense of peace wash over me. You know, Edith mused, your father always said that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch. I smiled, thinking of the plaque, of the faces I'd seen today, of the journey that had brought me here.
He was right, Mom.
And I think we've built something truly rich here. As night fell and the center's lights twinkled like stars, I knew that this was just the beginning. The legacy my father had left, the one I had fought so hard to protect and nurture, would continue to grow and touch lives for generations to come. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or proving Blaine wrong. It was about staying true to my values, about turning pain into purpose. And in doing so, I had not only honored my father's memory, but had also forged a new path, one of resilience, compassion, and enduring hope.